Hi everyone, and welcome to my year in review. This is all the knitting projects I've made in the year of 2023, and I'm going to go ahead and pop them on so I can show you each and every one. While I wasn't nearly as prolific this year as I was last year, I still made quite a lot of garments, including 24 different tops, as well as socks and hats. So I'm excited to show you everything. To start off with, I have the Moby Sweater from Petite Knit. I cast this on in 2022, but I did finish it in January of this year, so I'm counting it as a make for this year. This Moby Sweater was my first sort of like textured cabled knit, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. For this sweater, I used Drops Lima and Drops Kid Silk, both in the off-white colorway, for that classic sort of Aran sweater kind of look. And I made this in the size small. It is a little oversized on me, but I quite like how it looks. It's a little bit baggier than most of the sweaters I make, but it's nice and cozy and comfortable and great for the holiday season. Next up, I have the Owl Sweater from Kate Davies Design. I can't say that I've worn this one very much this year, just because I didn't love how fitted it is. Originally it was designed for a bulky weight yarn, and I went ahead and used Drops Nepal, which is more of like an Aran weight, and it's in the colorway Forest. I knew that I was using a much thinner weight yarn, and so I did move up in sizes and went ahead and made a size 5, even though my measurements probably put me in a size 2 or something like that. I do like how the owl cabling works up here. I never went ahead and put in any of the buttons for the eyes, just because I felt like that was too kitsch. And actually, seeing it in the viewfinder, I think it does look quite nice on me. I like it. It's just not one that I reach for super often. In February, I made the Champane Cardigan from Petite Knit. My gauge on this was a little far off, so even though I made the smallest extra small size, you can see it is still quite big, but this has been one of the sweaters that I've worn most often this year, and it's what convinced me that I needed to make more cardigans. So this was my very first cardigan I had ever made, and I used Drops Lima in the color Almond, as well as Drops Kid Silk in the color Almond. The reason that my gauge was off is because this is a yarn combination that I've used frequently before, and so I just measured my gauge on other sweaters that I'd already used this yarn combination and thought it would be fine. However, since all of those sweaters were knitted in the round, and this as a cardigan was really sort of knitted flat, so you have a wrong side and a right side, it meant that my gauge was off. All in all, I wish that it was a little bit smaller, but it hasn't stopped me from wearing this super frequently. I really love the mohair edition in this. It makes it feel soft and cuddly, and this is just something that I can throw on over anything, wear with any pair of jeans, and it's been one of my favorites in the wardrobe this year. Next up, I have the Whitmoor Sweater from Amy Loudon. I finished this in the first week of March. Again, this is another sweater that I don't wear too often, and I think it's because it's a little bit more fitted. I just don't think I'm as comfortable in the fitted sweaters, even though it's not tight, right? I still have my full range of motion. I just feel a little bit more self-conscious in the more fitted styles. But it's a really nice sweater, and I like it on me, so I really should take it out a little bit more often. So for this sweater, I've used Drops Alpaca and Drops Kid Silk, both in the pistachio ice cream colorway. I was absolutely in love with the pistachio ice cream when it came out. I did purchase the Kid Silk, and I made another sweater last year with the Kid Silk and pistachio, but I really felt I wanted one that was like truly green, so I went ahead and did this one as well. This was my sort of like first attempt at doing lace work. I do think that it looks really pretty, and I like how the lace sort of like continues down into the sleeves. So this was lace work that had to be done after the sleeve started moving on. So I did like how it like broke at the arm side, like kept going. But like I said, it's just a little too tight. I believe I made the extra small in this as well, because I didn't want something that was huge on me, and a lot of the photographs looked really big. I think that I might do this one again. It's definitely a pattern that I think looks nice on me, so I think I'm going to do it again, and I might go up a size or 2 in the next version that I make of this Whitmoor sweater. So coming off of the success of my Champane Cardigan, I decided to try another cardigan pattern from Petite Knit, and this one is the April Cardigan. It uses smaller gauge yarns, so for this one I have used the Knit Picks Hawthorn yarn in the colorway Cattail, which is sort of like a heavy fingering or sport weight yarn, and then I held that with Sandusgarn Tyne silk mohair in the colorway Sunny Lime. So I had purchased that Sunny Lime for a different sweater. It didn't quite match what I was thinking it was going to, but it worked perfectly with the cattail. And I'm really quite happy with how this turned out. I wear this sweater probably not as frequently as the Champane one, just because it is a little bit more of a vibrant, bright color, but it definitely makes me happy. And I really love how those two yarns knit up. I think that you get a lot of that sort of subtle tonal variation with the Hawthorn yarn, which looks quite cool and not something that I really had in my wardrobe up until this point. Another thing that I really liked about the April cardigan is this sort of saddle shoulder construction. I thought it fell really nicely on my shoulders, and it's something that I looked for in other patterns moving forward this year, because it's something that I really liked the fit of on my particular shoulders. So I have not made another one of these, but I definitely have one on the queue. So moving on to April, I made this sweater, which is a no frills sweater by Petite Knit. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with this pattern. I've made it 3 or 4 times now. This is probably the one that I like the most out of it. I went down a size, so I made a size small instead of a size medium, and then I also went down a size or 2 in my needles as well, and I got a fit that I was a little bit more happy for this. So for this sweater, I've used 2 yarns held together. I have Drops Alpaca in the colorway Wheatfield, and then I have the Hobby Mayflower Kid Silk yarn in the colorway Tapenade. It is sort of like an in-between yellow-green color, and I really love how this has turned out, though I know it's sort of like one of those ugly pretty colors that not everybody is in love with. For this one, I have used KFB increases along the raglan instead of the called for make one left and make one rights. That's something that I did quite frequently, just because at the time I wasn't comfortable with make one lefts and make one rights, but I think I've come to learn them and love them, so you'll see me use them more often as the sweaters progress throughout the year. As a simple basic sweater, I think this one turned out really, really well, and I've worn it several times throughout the year, and it's something that I reach to when I want like sort of a unique color, but I don't want to be too flashy. Next up, still in April, I was looking to make some more warm weather appropriate knit garments, and I picked up the Outline Tee from Jessie Made Design. So this is made in Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the colorway Olive. I do really like the color. I do think that this particular shirt turned up a little bit short, a little bit cropped on me. It does still show my belly button, and I chose to make this longer than the pattern had described, and it still wasn't long enough. I do have another ball or another skein of this particular yarn. Unfortunately, this sweater is knit from the bottom up, so it would be kind of difficult to add more length onto the bottom, but I might do it, we never know. For now, I'm just wearing it with a tank top, which makes me a little bit more confident, comfortable in how it looks. I do like the drop stitch design on this one. It gives you a really nice, interesting detail. It's also along the sleeves and the side of the garment, as well as the back. But unfortunately, did not wear this one as much as I thought I would this summer, just because of the length of the shirt. Next up, I have the Mailin Sweater from Isabel Kramer. This was the first time I've used a pattern from her. I didn't necessarily like the shoulder shape on these. I felt like the raglans are too far outwards, and it looked a little awkward on there. So that was one thing I didn't love about this pattern. I've used Malabrigo Rios, which is a worsted weight yarn in the colorway Peachy. It ended up being a lot more saturated of a color than I thought it was going to be when I purchased it online, and for that reason, it's not something that I wear super often. It does have sort of a cabled lacework design down the front of the sweater, and a really wide open neck. I think I've actually decided on this one that I am going to frog it completely and try to make something else. So next I have the Nurture Bralette by Celine Phaeton. I wore this a ton this summer. Surprisingly, even though it's wool, it was really, really comfortable in the warmer months. Not necessarily looking forward to putting on just a little bralette right now in the depths of December winter, but yeah, I really love this pattern, and it's something that I want to make again again. It's interesting because she does use the bottom cup depth measurements to sort of get a customized cup for the bra. So for the size on this one, I used size 2 with a BCD of 2 inches, and it fit beautifully. It does go up to quite a large size bust, though I'm not sure that it would really give you a whole lot of support if that's something that you're very, very interested in. I made this one sort of just a regular bra length, but I think when I make another one, I want to extend it down to make it more of like a camisole length, and I think that I would get even more wear out of it then. So for this one, I've used the Knit Picks Hawthorne yarn again, which is that sort of heavy fingering, almost sport weight yarn in the colorway Skyline. I really, really loved how this one turned out, and like I said, wore it a lot and will make again. This is the Simply Bralette by Jasmine Britton. Again, this was going into my trying to make more warm weather appropriate items. This one is knit in Malabrigos Arios in the colorway Churcas, which is a sort of variegated green color with olivey tones, which I absolutely love. I can't say that this was my favorite pattern. I don't love the resolution of some of the straps as well as the back of the pattern, and I do find that the front, which is just supposed to have an Icelandic bind off, sort of rolls on me because it's not a great finish for the front. But I did like the double thickness folded hem along the bottom. So I think I'm going to adopt that bottom hem when I make a second version of the Nurture Bralette that's a little bit longer. So I do wear this one even though it wasn't my favorite pattern. It's definitely something that's easy to wear underneath like cardigans or stuff like that, or lighter weight linen shirts, and nice, easy breezy, and beautiful. Now I have the Shimo Sweater by Lenny Hoy. This one I chose because I really wanted to learn how to do bobbles, and it does have some bobbles down the front of the sweater here, which hopefully you can see. It also has a really beautiful lace work and twisted rib design. I think the best part about this pattern is the cuff on here. I think the cuff, where it also includes that same sort of bobbled pattern and twisted rib elongated cuff, looks really, really nice. This is knit in 2 yarns held together, the Knitting for Olive Merino, which is their light fingering, and the Knitting for Olive Soft Silk Mohair, both of those in the colorway Rust. I love the color on this. I think that the Knitting for Olive Mohair does really great in the darker, more saturated colors because you really don't see the core like you do in a cheaper mohair like the Drop Kid Silk. So if I'm choosing darker colors moving forward, I will splurge on the Knitting for Olive Kid Silk just because I think it looks a little more refined and saturated. So I love this sweater. I think that I would probably make it again in probably the same yarns but a different colorway. I do wear it a lot. I think if I make it a second time, I would leave out the bobbles and just do the straight lace pattern design because I didn't enjoy doing bobbles, and I don't know that it enhances my enjoyment of the sweater very much, but I do love the sweater as an overall design. So this next sweater I finished in the first week of June. This is the Marseille pattern by Petite Knit, though at the time I was really taken by the look of her Melange sweater, so I wanted something that looked like the Melange with a pattern that I had already purchased. So for this sweater, I've held 2 yarns together that are different colors. Both of these are Knit Picks tonal strolls, and I used the colors Kiwi and Frozen. So a little green color and as well as a blue color. And I was hoping that it would get that sort of melange look, but it ended up just sort of looking variegated because both of those yarns were sort of tonal. It does have a double folded color, which I think is a little bit aggressive on this sweater, but I do like the nice deep hem it has on the ribbing at the bottom, as well as the nice deep ribbing on the sleeves and the drop shoulder design. I wore this a lot more in the summer than I did any other time. I think because it's superwash yarns, it doesn't have the same sort of like warming effect as a lot of my other wool sweaters, so I really think of this more as a summer weight sweater than a nice cozy winter one. Next, I have an outline tank top by Jessie Made Designs. I learned my lesson from the T version of this pattern, and I did lengthen this one a little bit more, and I'm much happier with the length that I got on it. I used Knitting for Olive Pure Silk in the colorway Sunflower, which is a nice, beautiful, warm, rich yellow color. I will say that the silk has sort of bagged out or stretched a little bit as I've worn this a few times, so I might need to go in and shorten the straps on this, but it has the same sort of drop stitch design as the t-shirt had, both along the front and the sides of the tank top. Next, I have the September cardigan from Petite Knit. I have made the September pullover. I made that last year, and I'm also working on another one for this year, but I have not finished it. This one uses 3 strands of yarn. I've used a strand of Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the color dark cognac, Drops Kids silk in the color chocolate, and then Drops Nord in, which is a fingering weight yarn, and that one is in the color chestnut. So chocolate, chestnut, and dark cognac. This is definitely a foodie themed cardigan. It is done in brioche stitch, and the reason that I wanted to do this one is because I knew that brioche flat was a little bit easier than brioche in the round, so I really wanted to try it out, and it did work out exactly as expected. So just like most brioche, it did block out a lot bigger once I was finished. I did knit this in the medium, and I was a little bit concerned when I finished because I felt like it looked too small, but after blocking, I think it's a perfect sort of like relaxed fit, and again, a cardigan that I throw on a lot over different things if I'm just getting a little bit chilly or I need something to cover up. Next, I have the Marseille Sweater from Petite Knit. I really like how this one turned out, though it is a little bit on the large side for me. I probably should have gone down 1 size. The pattern has you do 4 stripes, but I only did 3 because I was quite happy with the length that I was getting on there. I've used 2 yarns in this one, obviously. I've used the Knitting for Olive Heavy Merino in the colorway Marzipan for the light and Navy for the dark blue stripes. I think this is just a classic looking sweater. I think it looks great any time of day, and I have worn it a lot since I finished it. Moving right along, I have the Jenny Sweater from Petite Knit. This one I finished up in August. It took me a really long time, I think close to 2 months for this, but I was knitting other sweaters in between just because I found the smocking stitch was a little bit tedious and not something I wanted to do all in one go. I'm really happy with how it turned out. I think it is one of my most complicated sweaters I've made to date, but it looks really, really cool, and I think that I know the work and effort that went into it, so I'm very, very proud of this. For this one, I've used 2 yarns, Drops Flora and Drops Kids Silk. I cannot remember the name. I think the Flora is Misty Forest and the Kids Silk is Sea Green or something like that. But I really am happy with how this turned out. It's definitely sort of like my magnum opus for the year in terms of most complicated, difficult projects I've tackled so far. Next, I have another No Frills Sweater from Petite Knit. This one I've knit in the medium, and you can see that sort of like sizing issue that I was having with this particular pattern where the body is just really quite large on this. Again, I was going for that melange look, and I've used 2 strands of Knit Picks palette yarn, which is a Peruvian Highland wool fingering weight, and I've used the color Tranquil and Brown Sugar. My idea with this is I kind of wanted something that looked like a coppered patina, which I do sort of get that impression on here, though it's not super prevalent. This one was much more successful of getting the melange look than the other one that I had made. I do find that this sweater feels a little bit short in the back. Even though I had done some additional short row shaping to get it elongated in the back, because I knew I was having this problem with this particular pattern, I still think it needs more short rows in the back just to get it to look how I would have liked. However, I did run out of yarn, so this was as much sweater as I was ever going to be able to make with it. I have worn it several days, even though it's a little bit shorter than I would prefer. I tend to always wear it with something underneath, like a button-up shirt or a tank top, and that sort of gets over any of those qualms. From there, in September, I finished up my Ingrid Sweater from Petite Knit. Originally, I did not like this pattern, but I saw it so much on my feed that eventually I needed to have one, and I absolutely love it now that it's finished. This, again, is one of my most worn sweaters from the year, even though I finished it not that long ago in September. So I've used 2 yarns with this. I used Drops Puna, which is 100% alpaca in the colorway beige, no, taupe, and then I've used Drops Kid Silk in the colorway beige, and it is, again, a nice soft, fluffy sweater, which is really nice and cozy. I love all of the texture on here. I love the moss stitch and the mock cables and the 2x2. Everything about it I absolutely adore. It is a drop shoulder fit, but it's not too oversized. I just think this one turned out perfectly. I did decide after making this one that I really loved moss stitch, and I wanted to make a moss stitch sweater, which you will see a couple from now, because I didn't wait very long until I made that dream come reality. But the Ingrid sweater is definitely a staple that I've worn multiple times in the last couple of weeks. I don't think I would make another one though, just because it is such a unique texture design. I don't think that I need another sweater out of it. Next, I have the Lata Sweater by Knits by Giselle. At the time that I purchased this pattern, this was her very first pattern, and I purchased it on the first day it was out, which was a mistake. I should have waited. There were some errata that needed to be fixed. And I had some issues with this one. Primarily, the sleeves are just way too long. At this point, what I've done is taken some yarn and sort of gathered it up and tied it into a more ruched design on the sleeves, which gives it sort of like an effortless slouchy look, which I kind of like. I haven't decided yet if I need to rip it back and just redo the sleeves shorter, because I do have two different colors of yarn working in the sleeves, two different dye lots working in there, so I might just rip them back so that I don't have that anymore. But for now, I've been kind of enjoying the slouchy, ruched look. I picked this design because it was a half fisherman's rib, which I've never done before, and I really liked this sort of like bracketed stitching design in the front of the sweater, which I do think turned out really well. As much issues as I had with this pattern, I would make it again. And in fact, I have the yarn to make it again. So I probably will. I will size down a little and of course make sure that I make the sleeves a little bit shorter. I think most of the issues that I had, besides the ones where the pattern was missing information, that has all been fixed. But most of my issues were just that I had never worked in this stitch pattern before. So I like it. It's not perfect. I want another go at it. I went ahead and made a second Champane Cardigan from Petite Knit. This one I made sure to match my gauge a little bit better, and I've used the Knit Picks Simply Wool Worsted in the colorway Winnie, which is sort of like a light taupish gray. I really like how this turned out. I didn't put any mohair in the sweater because I wanted something that was a little bit more casual, a little bit more rugged, and I liked the idea that this sort of like eco undyed wool not having a mohair in it. So because I worked on my gauge, it definitely fits a lot better. This is the same size as my other one I made. It is a medium, but it fits a lot better on me, and I really like how this one has turned out as well. I think my favorite part of this pattern is really just this double folded or double knitted button band on here, and the way that it forms into the buttonholes themselves is just really nice and beautiful. I also like the 3-stitch wide raglan on here. It looks a lot nicer. I think it adds like a nice interesting design element without being too difficult to do. This is just sort of like a casual cardigan, again something I throw on a lot if I'm just feeling chilly or I want something a little bit more covered up. So next I have the Caramel Sweater from Petite Knit. This began my sort of love affair with turtlenecks, and you'll see that the next two sweaters after this were also turtlenecks as well. I've used 2 yarns held together for this, Drops Flora in the color Petrol, and then a sort of green wool mohair that I purchased off of Amazon that was really cheap in the color Withered Green. I do like the combination of these two together, the mohair and the yarn. It gives the sweater a nice interesting texture, and I also really love this really, luscious 2x2 knit turtleneck that comes on here. It's a little bit wide. It also has really elongated, I think it's like a 6-inch 2x2 ribbing on the sleeve of this. I love how this one turned out. I haven't worn it very often just because I finished it about a month ago, so it hasn't had much opportunity to be worn, but it definitely will because I think it turned out really lovely and not like anything that I currently had in my sweater wardrobe. Next, I have the Ppoppo Sweater by Ego Knits. This is the manifestation of my need for a moss stitch sweater, and I really, really love how it turned out. I did have some issues with the pattern itself. It was not as big as the pattern said it was going to be. Like, there weren't enough stitches in order to get the oversized fit that it was supposed to have. So I did have to add some extra increase rounds and some extra stitches added underneath the arms in order to get the size that I wanted. But I am in love with how it turned out. It's one of my favorites. So for this one, I've used Drops Lima in the colorway Wheat, and Knitting for Olive Kid Silk, soft silk mohair, also in the color Wheat. It's a really nice sort of like saturated neutral cream color that I think works well with my skin tone. I do love this sort of like heightened color, not quite a turtleneck because it doesn't fold over, but it does sit quite high. And again, this one has that 3-stitch raglan that sort of interrupts the moss stitch, which I think looks really nice. And it also has these sort of framing stitches that go along the sleeve. Hopefully you can see those two there, and then some more that go down the side of the garment as well. So I just finished this in November. It hasn't had a lot of time to be worn, but I have worn it several days just because it's one of my favorites. I think this color is a great neutral. I love the moss stitch. I think it's an easy, oversized knit, and it's something that I will wear a lot moving forward. Next, I have the Terrazzo Sweater by Petite Knit. This was sort of a white whale knit for me. I loved it since the first moment I saw it, but of course I was not able to find the Noro yarn for the longest time. And then when I was able to find some in Omitama, I scooped it up and went ahead and made this sweater. I used the main yarn called for in the pattern, which is the Noro Silk Garden Sock Solo in the color S1 Omitama, and I have held that with Knitting for Olive soft silk mohair in the colorway Linen. The Linen, which is sort of like a grayer neutral beige, I think does a good job of sort of toning down some of the more extreme colors in that Noro yarn. It makes it a little bit more wearable, a little bit more classic. Of course, it does have this really nice twisted rib collar. It is fully twisted rib, so both knits and the pearls are twisted. It took me absolutely ages to do, but I do really love how it looks. It also has the twisted rib cuffs as well, and the bottom hem of the sweater. I think this looks great. I don't have anything like this sort of like variegated. It looks to me like sedimentary rock of all those different layers, and I think that it's really unique, special yarn, and I'm really glad that I was able to find some and make a garment out of it. When I did find it, I went a little bit crazy and I bought 7 balls instead of the 4 that I needed. I ended up only using 3.5, so I do have enough to make a whole nother sweater, and I think what I'm gonna do is an April cardigan out of it. But again, this has the same saddle shoulders as the April cardigan, and I really love how that worked. I do find that the saddle shoulder on this particular pattern ends a little bit short, a little bit narrow on me. I wish it was longer, but I'm not super familiar with that construction technique, so I wasn't really able to adjust it, but I do think it still hangs quite nicely. So if you made it this far, congratulations, you've made it to the last and final sweater. This one just came off of the blocking mats probably 2 days ago. I have not had time yet to put buttons on it. So this one, I like to watch Handmade by Florence here on YouTube, and she made this cardigan and I was absolutely in love with it. She is coming out with a pattern for it. However, I was not selected as a pattern tester. I was pretty sad about that, but I definitely wanted this cardigan, so I decided to go ahead and try to figure it out on my own. So this one is completely self-drafted, just using photographs and like stopping and starting on her video to see if I could see different details on it, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out. So this is a broken rib stitch, that is the texture on it, and then I do have a 5-stitch wide raglan on there. I did a crew neck just like hers. I did a double folded button band up along the front. I did do a 1x1 rib on the neckline. I think that looks okay. I think hers is a double folded or double knit neckline as well, but I just didn't like how that looked on mine. So it does still need some buttons, but overall it's finished, and I'm quite happy with how it turned out, especially for the first time I've ever made a sweater using my own calculations and stuff like that. So it's 2 yarns held together, the knitting for all of heavy merino and knitting for all of soft silk mohair, both in the colorway Fennel seed, which is a nice sort of warm neutral green. I went ahead and purchased some of the regular merino in Fennel seed as well, because I think when I make sort of a matching top for this, maybe camisole number 9 or camisole number 5 for my favorite things knitwear, I think it would be really cool to have like a matching set of a camisole and a cardigan to go together. So that's the last sweater I've made in 2023, and I can just really quickly go over the other non-sweater related items. First, I have a pair of socks, and this is using the Humber pattern, which is a free sock pattern. I've used Knit Picks Hawthorne in the colorway Mount Scott, I believe, which is sort of like a green and purple variegated tonal yarn. It does have a little bit of lacework detail that goes down the ankle and extends into the foot. I've made Hermione's favorite socks, which is another free sock pattern. This one again is using a Knit Picks Hawthorne in the colorway Forest, I believe. So just a dark green tonal. This one has some texture in the sock here, but it doesn't really show up because of the tonality of the yarn, so that's a little disappointing. I would definitely do the pattern again, just not in such a variegated yarn. And then the last pair of socks I made was the Friendship socks. This just uses 2 different colors, and this was sort of like my only foray into color work this year, was just doing some stripes, which I didn't think counted as color work, but I do really like how these turned out. This one uses I don't think it's a German short row heel. I think it's a shadow wrap heel, which is my first time ever doing a shadow wrap heel. I did it much better on the second one than the first one. I don't have any holes. I just don't think it's like the cleanest look. I think my definitely preferred method is that regular heel flap and gusset versus something like this construction. I also made 2 hats this year. I made a 2x2 hat, and this one was a free pattern, and I've used some leftover knitting for olive heavy merino in the color marzipan, and then I held it with Rico's Make It Tweed, which is a really interesting sort of lace weight yarn that gives you those sort of like rainbow tweedy effects. I think that turned out really good. So I've worn this one a lot. It does because of the 2x2 ribbing on there, it really sort of has bagged out a lot, and I kind of need to block it and maybe see if I can't shrink it down anymore. I've also made a 1x1 hat. This is another free pattern. I can't remember the name of it. Using knitting for olive merino and soft silk mohair in the color Slate. This one I've worn quite often. It gets a lot of wear. Having that little bit of mohair in the hat definitely keeps it a lot warmer, and I've really enjoyed wearing it in the winter months this year. So this one has gotten a lot of wear, more than this one has. And then the last thing that I've made this year is just this little teeny tiny penguin. This is a Claire Garland pattern. She does give them away for free, her patterns, these little ones, probably 1 pattern every 2 or 3 months. So I did pick this one up for free, and it turns out quite cute. He does not sit up very well. He leans forward and he falls on his face, so that's a little bit unfortunate. And I think he looks cuter from the side than front on. I don't know about Claire Garland's patterns. Like, I always want to make them because I think they're adorable, but then like, what do I do when they're finished? I hope you guys have enjoyed my look at my 2023 knitting makes, and I'll see everyone next year. Take care.